Hello, everyone. Good morning. America is coming to terms with another mass shooting. 6 people were shot dead and dozens injured when a gunman on a roof with a high-powered rifle opened fire on an Independence Day parade. Police have arrested a 22-year-old named Robert E. Crimo. According to the Gun Violence Archive, this is the latest of 311 mass shootings in the US so far this year. Mark Stone is standing by for us in Chicago. Hi, Mark. Yet another mass shooting in the US.
Morning, Kay. Yes, it is so depressing to be reporting once again from another mass shooting, this time on the North Shore of Chicago, here in a pretty affluent neighborhood. Chicago is a place known to have its problem with guns, with gangs. But this was something different. This was a neighborhood, families gathering together on July the 4th to remember and celebrate Independence Day.
Captured in the space of just a few moments, America at its patriotic best and its bloody worst. An extraordinary volley of gunfire filmed from multiple angles on the phones of those who were at this Independence Day parade to have fun. Some run, others for a moment think the noise is part of the show. Quickly realise this is yet another mass shooting, and this time it is their neighbourhood. The gunman had been firing from a rooftop, picking off his fellow Americans, young and elderly.
There was a young child there that I was doing a little CPR until the paramedics got there, and he looked horribly injured. I'm not sure exactly the injury, but I mean, people were doing anything they could.
It was just crazy, and I just remember hearing people screaming and running.
It took nearly 8 hours for a manhunt to end with this, the arrest of a man authorities say is a person of interest. Robert E. Crimo III, known as Bobby, is just 22. A search of his name online has revealed a social media footprint that will be vital for investigators. An amateur rapper with a fascination for guns, videos that appear to depict mass murder. It suggests a dark, troubled personality. 5 people were confirmed to have died at the scene.
Just a slight moment of silence for all
in Washington,
families.
A moment of silence. The president's July 4th address was hastily changed to reflect the news.
You all heard what happened. You all heard what happened today. But each day we're reminded there's nothing guaranteed about our democracy. Nothing guaranteed about our way of life. We have to fight for it, defend it, and earn it by voting.
All down this road, the chairs, the flags, the bits and pieces of an Independence Day parade left behind as people ran for cover. This is a community which began the day ready for that all-American ritual of July the 4th, and it ended the day numb. And again with so many questions. That gun debate will go on and on.
How did he get his weapon, and where did he get it? Could all this have been prevented? Schools, churches, supermarkets, now a community parade. Another community shattered.
Just so depressing, Kay, as I said, and when we arrived here this evening, in fact, having come from another Independence Day parade in Washington, D.C. These are events that happen in communities right across this country. We arrived at this one so similar to the one that we were at, and it was just eerie, awful, as you saw, empty, and all the paraphernalia of a family day out left there. In terms of the investigation, well, the police have a person of interest, as they are describing him, in custody. He's a local man. You saw a little bit of his social media presence there in my report. It will be a centre of their investigation. What we don't yet know, of course, is did he legally own the weapon? What sort of weapon was it? How did he get hold of it? Key questions that the investigators will want to answer, and the American public, not least here in this community, will want answers to, and fast.
OK, Mark, thank you. Thanks a lot. Premier League footballer has been arrested in North London On suspicion of rape, the man, who's in his 20s and can't be named for legal reasons, has been questioned over an alleged rape which happened last month, according to the police. He's being held in custody following his arrest. Airline passengers are being urged to be cautious when buying travel insurance ahead of what's predicted to be a summer of disruption. New research from consumer group Which reveals that 4 in 10 policies offer no protection for cancellations caused by strikes. Ashna is at Bristol Airport for us this morning, which is exactly what so many people who are travelling don't want to hear, isn't it, Ashna?
You're right, Kay, considering the amount of pressure the travel industry has been under. If you're not worried about if your bag's going to make it, whether your flight's going ahead, now there are concerns about potential summer of disruption when it comes to strike action and what that could mean for passengers. As you mentioned there, consumer group Which has found that 40% of travel insurance policies do not cover you when it comes to flights being cancelled because of strike action. They assessed 199 policies and they found that 78 of those did not cover passengers. There is, we know, widespread disruption across the aviation industry, so this will only add to concern. Only yesterday, EasyJet's chief operating officer, many of those flights, of course, operating here from Bristol Airport, resigned after thousands of EasyJet flights have been axed last minute in particular. But we know that it's not just that airline, it's a number of them, whether it's London Gatwick, London Heathrow, Bristol, but we know also abroad, internationally, Amsterdam Schiphol Airport has also had to cancel a number of flights. We know that those last-minute cancellations are only going to get worse, particularly this week. The government has given carriers till Friday to make last-minute changes to their schedules before facing a potential penalty. But this news about travel insurance, I mean, we used to take it out, aren't we, when it comes to preparing for the pandemic. When it comes to strike action, you won't be covered by 40% of those policies.
OK, for now, thank you. Going to Gatwick Airport in just a short while to bring you the very latest from there as well. 105,000 British Airways passenger seats are going to be cancelled because they cannot cope with the demand. What does that mean for you? We'll be speaking to Simon Calder, who is the travel editor of The Independent, very shortly. Meantime, let's turn to Ukraine, where President Putin has declared victory in the eastern province of Luhansk and is now setting his sights on Donetsk. What does that mean for the people of Ukraine and indeed the president? Sally standing by for us in Kiev. Sally, good morning. The latest from where you are, please.
Yeah, it certainly feels like the war is entering a new phase, Kay. That victory in Luhansk for Russia, that one of 2 provinces that make up the Donbass region, which they are intent on taking control of. That's really the biggest victory for Russia in this war since Mariupol fell in May. And many towns and cities that many people will not have heard of before the last few months have become common parlance. Well, expect to learn a few more new names in the coming days and weeks as Russian forces set their sights on Donetsk. That's the other region that makes up the Donbass, where Ukraine maintains a lot of control there, certainly in the major cities. And Sloviansk and Kramatorsk are 2 cities that you will no doubt hear a lot more about in the coming days. Sloviansk has already been hit pretty hard in the last few days by Russian forces as they try to now look at moving their offensive into that region. But I should say that Ukrainian forces have had a lot more time to build up their defence positions and reinforcements there. They're confident that they will be able to defend themselves much more there than they managed to in Luhansk. But certainly one thing that they need is they need more weapons, more artillery and more rockets specifically. They're being completely outgunned by Russian forces. They're not superior to them in terms of manpower, but they certainly need much more artillery in terms of trying to turn this tide. OK, Sally, thank you. Well, our special correspondent Alex Crawford reports from the frontline town of Marinka and Krasnohorvika.
They know the rest of the Donbass is next on the Russian target list. We're the first British journalists to get a look at the foreign-supplied heavy artillery they hope will turn the war for them. And they remain optimistic, despite their recent losses, with this message to the Russians. It's not for long, the commander says. We'll kick you out and get it all back. The loss of 1/2 of the Donbass is tough, but they're not giving up. They can't. This heavy artillery system is highly accurate and highly mobile. They've been provided to Ukraine by multiple countries. This one's a Caesar and it comes from France. But they are still heavily outnumbered and outgunned by Russian stocks. And that's why they're crying out for many more. The Russians are already pushing deeper into eastern Ukraine. This is the Ukrainians' most effective way of fighting back. The Donbass battlefield has seen the most intense fighting of the year so far, since the Russian leader unilaterally declared the two regions independent. But Russia wants all of the Donbass, and it doesn't look like much is going to stop them. This is what a howitzer can do. Here it obliterates a Russian tank, but this modern weaponry's arrived late and maybe not in enough time to save the Donbass.
Well, you can watch Alex's full report on our website, news.sky.com. Hundreds of people have been rescued overnight. Thousands more residents in and around Sydney are affected by flooding. Days of torrential rain on Australia's east coast have led to dams overflowing and rivers bursting their banks. Let's get the latest, should we, from Windsor in New South Wales. Nicole standing by for us again this morning. Nicole, you were telling us yesterday this is the fourth time that families have had to put up with this in, 18 months?
That's right, and there could be even more to come. Authorities had been hoping that the rain would ease off over the next few days, but it seems that it's going to continue. More wild weather is expected, and that's why we'll keep seeing scenes like this. I mean, this is the scale of the flooding here and around Sydney right now. Just miles of flood water. This should be a major road connecting two towns, but we just took a boat out there and houses are underwater, a sports field. You really can't see anything. It's just like a massive lake. As you said, people here are exhausted, they're tired, they're fed up from constant flooding. 3 and 4 floods. Some houses have gone underwater multiple times. And that's because for the last couple of years, Australia has been under a La Nina weather event. And that has brought these torrential rains and sort of wild weather to the east coast of Australia. Viewers might remember a few months ago, big rains and flooding up in Lismore, where 10,000 people are still homeless. In this flood right now, 19,000 houses are without power. 50,000 people have been affected. They've been told to either evacuate from their homes or to get their plans in place so that when emergency crews come in and tell them to leave, that they'll be ready. So it's a very serious situation. People are really upset. We've seen emergency crews out and about trying to rescue those who haven't heeded the warning to get out while they can. They say that many people have actually become complacent. A little earlier today, we also saw crews out trying to rescue some of the wildlife here. We saw a joey and a kangaroo, in fact, come out on a boat just here. Very typical Australian thing, I suppose you would say. But what isn't typical is this rain. And it is winter here, so we would expect to see some, but not to the extent that we've had over the last few days.
OK, for now, thanks very much indeed. Thanks a lot. I want to look at what the papers are doing for you this morning as well, very much reflecting on what's happening with Boris Johnson. Should we start with the Daily Mirror? The Mirror leads with news the PM didn't know about previous allegations against Chris Pincher before appointing him as Deputy Chief Whip. Looking at The Guardian for you now, saying 2 major unions are calling for Parliament to act to stop what they call the seemingly endless allegations of sexual misconduct by MPs. Looking at The Telegraph for you, it says Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer is facing a party revolt of his own over his decision not to take the UK back into the EU if he becomes Prime Minister. The Metro leads with fuel price protests, which affect several UK motorways. Daily Mail reports the Home Secretary has ordered police to crack down on any future such protests. Also, the lead story on the front of today's Times, which has the headline, Get Tough with Petrol Protesters. And The Sun has news of the arrest of an unnamed Premier League footballer over allegations of rape. Deputy Prime Minister's with us now. Good morning. Thanks for joining us on the programme. Tory sleaze. How long have you personally known Chris Pincher was an alleged sex pest?
Well, that's a very generic term. What's the specific question? I've obviously seen the most recent reports. He's stepped down as a minister. He's had the whip withdrawn. I think the reports are very serious. They deserve to be independently investigated. That's what will now happen under the parliamentary grievance process. I think we need to respect that. I think the integrity of the system is very important. For me, the most important thing is that anyone who's got a complaint of this kind of severity must feel confident and comfortable in coming forward.
What exactly did you know about his behaviour?
Well,
there's a list. There's a list as long as my arm.
Yeah, but that's true. So, but there's always reports and rumours swirling around Westminster. It's that kind of place, you know that. And lots of these things don't materialise. And actually, having worked with Chris Pincher, I always found him, on the whole, very professional. But as there's a report about a complaint that was made at the Foreign Office, I'm sure you're poised to ask me about that. And we dealt with that in the most rigorous and robust way.
I'll do the questions, you do the answers. 2019, he was working for you. Were you completely comfortable with being his boss when these sort of allegations were being levelled against him?
Well, just to be clear, because that's a specific question, I can give you a very clear answer.
Go on, then.
There was a complaint made by someone that worked with him about inappropriate behaviour. I swiftly agreed with the Permanent Secretary, Sir Simon MacDonald, at the time, that ought to be reviewed under the civil services auspices to make sure it was done without fear or favour. It came back and did not recommend formal disciplinary action, and it should be said that the individual that made the complaint did not want that. I spoke to Chris Pincher about the inappropriate behaviour, made it clear in no uncertain terms it should desist, it must never be repeated. So did the Permanent Secretary. For additional assurance, because I take this so seriously, I also referred it to the Cabinet Office Propriety and Ethics team, which also looked at it, for example, to see whether action was warranted under the Ministerial Code. They didn't. They agreed that it didn't warrant that. So although there was a complaint made about inappropriate behaviour, it did not trigger the disciplinary action either at the civil service level or the Cabinet Office level in relation to the Code of Conduct. So I not only followed it to the strict letter, I went beyond that and sought the assurance. Why? Because I think it's so important that people that make complaints feel and can have the confidence to come forward.
So it's the Propriety and Ethics team's fault that he continues on with this list of inappropriate behaviour, at the very least.
I don't think anyone could say I was blaming them. Anyone. What I wanted to make sure is that there was proper assurance and integrity around the process, because that's so important. There's a load of, you know what Westminster's like, there's a whole rumour mill, but when you get a specific complaint, important that that's handled rigorously, robustly and fairly. Again, I also make the point that the individual concerned wanted to continue working with Chris Pincher at the time and did not want formal action taken.
What about the Prime Minister's now wife, who made her comments in writing in 2017 when she worked at Tory Central Office?
Well, I can't speak to that. I don't know about that, but of course that was under the previous Prime Minister.
Yeah, but the Prime Minister must have known. Are you suggesting that Carrie, then Simmons, now Johnson, never spoke to her Prime Minister husband about the behaviour of this man?
No, that wasn't what I was suggesting. I don't know the facts of it. What I was saying is that the reappointment of Chris Pincher back in 2017, following complaints that had been made about him at the time, followed an independent process conducted by a QC, which did not uphold the claims made against him. And his reappointment as a minister at that time was obviously under the previous government and the previous Prime Minister. Those are the facts as I know them.
OK. Talk to me about what Downing Street were telling Junior Minister, bless him, yesterday, Will Quince. This is what he said to us on the show yesterday. It's going to be in this screen.
I spoke with Number 10 both yesterday and today, and I asked them firmly and clearly for an answer on this, and I've been given categorical assurance that the Prime Minister was not aware of any serious specific allegation with regards to the former Deputy Chief Whip. Is
that true?
Yeah, I don't think I don't think the Prime Minister is aware of any substantiated complaints to the extent that they would trigger a formal mechanism. And as I said, there's a distinction between the rumour mill of Westminster and complaints that either result in a formal process or a formal sanction.
Yeah, but the Prime Minister, we heard from Downing Street, what, 3 hours later, saying that 4 hours later, the Prime Minister was aware of allegations that were either resolved or did not progress to a formal complaint. As a lawyer, I mean, can you tell me the difference between those 2 points?
Yeah, the difference is a complaint that is made that is of where there's the evidence and it's of the severity where formal either disciplinary action is taken, which is something which would happen in all professional walks of life, or in addition, triggers mechanisms, for example, under the Ministerial Code of Conduct. And so the allegations that we're talking about had not reached that level, and that's precisely what the account I think I've just given you fairly and squarely about what happened in October of 2019.
So just to clarify, not aware of specific allegations is what the Minister sat there and said he checked with Number 10. They said to say, not aware of specific allegations. 4 hours later, aware of allegations that were resolved or did not progress to a formal complaint. That is dancing on the head of a pin.
I don't think it is. I think Will, from what I just understood, talked about specific and serious allegations. And I think there's a distinction between something which is either not of the severity or is resolved informally and something which clearly does trigger a formal disciplinary action or formal sanction. And I think most people would understand that that is a fair and reasonable distinction to draw.
But there's a pattern of behaviour, isn't there? 2012, 2013, 2017, 2019, September 2019, 2021, October 2021, December 2021, June 2022. Is that really somebody who is an appropriate person to be laying down the law as Deputy Chief Whip?
Well, you've just read out a list of dates, and I don't know what each one referred to, but all I can say is where there's been a credible complaint made, they've been followed up, whether it was by me in the Foreign Office or in 2017, there was a QC that conducted the process. I think that's right. There is a rumour mill in Westminster, and I think it's important both for the confidence of victims, but also fairness, that you have independent processes. And I think that's absolutely... I mean, what you're complaining about is that we've been too loyally and done it too much by the book.
I'm not complaining at all. I'm trying to get down to the bottom of what's going on.
But I think it is important to be absolutely rigorous and scrupulously go by the book. And of course, in relation to Chris Pincher's appointment as Deputy Chief Whip, the Cabinet Office Propriety and Ethics team did not raise an objection to that appointment. We rely on these independent processes because they're capable of commanding the trust of those with which we work, and that is the crucial thing in all this case.
I've got to wonder where the bar is, though. How high are we setting or low are we setting this bar?
Well, I don't think it's right that just because there's rumour and gossip, someone loses their job. I do think...
Of course not.
No, I do think it is right that when a complaint is made, it is properly investigated, and then you know, is it serious enough, is it credible enough to warrant formal action, whether it's disciplinary or under the Ministerial Code. I think that's the right bar to set.
OK. So when you were his boss,
yeah,
you were completely happy with his behaviour. You say that you pulled him to one side on one occasion.
Yeah.
Why was that?
Because of the complaint that was made.
What was the complaint?
Just because I'm respecting the confidentiality of the processes and those involved, I don't think it's right for me to go into that. I know why you asked the question. What I would just say is I spoke to him in no uncertain terms. I have to say, and this is no excuse, this is no mitigation, but if you're asking me, my sense is that Chris Pincher was actually an exceptional minister and very well regarded. And it's interesting, and this sometimes is the case with inappropriate behaviour. It's interesting that the complainant that came forward did not want formal action taken. Now,
that can be for all sorts of
exactly.
reasons.
No, I'm agreeing with you.
As we know.
And that is why, I totally agree, and that is why that relationship between ministers and the civil servants who do such a fabulous job for us needs to be protected. And that is precisely why I went and asked the Cabinet Office to look at it again to check that the judgment of the civil service was right.
But I don't know what to say to you, because no action was taken against him. You say there wasn't enough evidence because someone didn't want to press that further for whatever reason. They might have been anxious, they might have been concerned.
But the reason you have an independent process is also to check, regardless of what the complainant says, whether it is of a severity that would warrant disciplinary action.
But it looks as though it went on and on and on, even to the extent where middle of last week, he was groping allegedly 2 men at the Carlton Club, people watching what was going on.
Well, and the minute that complaint was made, he resigned himself. I don't think he had any choice. And the whip was removed pending a formal investigation under the grievance and complaints procedure of the House of Commons. That is the correct way to handle that allegation.
What did the PM actually know, do you think? I'm sure you must have talked about it.
At which point in time? I've talked him through, in recent days, what happened in 2019. My sense is, but again, I can't speak for exactly what the Prime Minister knew, but my sense is that he would have been aware when the wire was tripped into formal disciplinary action, or let alone a formal sanction. But of course, we're constantly, Westminster is awash with gossip, rumour, and I think it is right to draw that distinction.
Talking about what happened with you in 2019 when you had to, let's say, discipline him, you say talk to him.
Well, it wasn't disciplinary action. It's very important to draw that distinction.
So when you had to speak to him firmly, did you then subsequently tell the Prime Minister about it?
No, and I wouldn't expect to in relation to something that fell below the bar of disciplinary action. What I did do was inform the Chief Whip, because I do think it's important that we keep a proper record, and I referred it to the Cabinet Office Propriety and Ethics team because I wanted the assurance, and that's not to say that I disagreed with the view of the Permanent Secretary or the Civil Service, but because I attach such importance to those around and those who work with us having the confidence in the processes which are there to protect them. It's very important, and I take that incredibly seriously.
The FDA and Prospect unions, they represent about 1,000 parliamentary workers. They say that Parliament is an unsafe place to work because, potentially, of people like this.
Well, that's why we've got the new process in place, an independent grievance and complaint process, and we need to vest them with the power and the confidence to do their job. In the relation to Chris Pincher, that's exactly what's happening.
OK, talk to me about what should happen to him now.
Well, I think if you've got an independent process, it's right to allow them to conduct their investigation, and then depends on the outcome. And I'm not going to get ahead of that. He's not a Tory MP. He's had the whip removed, suspended, pending that investigation. That's the right thing. I do also think when you've got a formal mechanism like this, you've got to respect and not impinge on its ability to conduct that investigation without prejudice.
When you look back, what would you have done differently?
I've done exactly the same again.
Even though it appears from this list that I've read to you, I don't need to go into all of the details, not least because there are children watching at this time in the morning. But back from 2012 through to 2022, that's a 10-year period where it looks as though he has potentially abused several people on varying levels.
And that's the luxury of a journalist.
I was going to go on to say, given that, should the police be investigating?
Well, look, you asked me what I could have done, should have done differently. I think it's critically important to have an independent process. Once the Civil Service had conducted it, I wanted the reassurance of the Cabinet Office, but there was nothing that was reported back to me that would have warranted disciplinary action, let alone a police investigation. Of course, if I'd have known something different, a different set of facts, I would have acted on them as quickly and as rigorously as I did the complaint that I became aware of. OK, it's good to talk to you. Yeah, good to talk to you. I've got to leave it there. Thanks very much indeed. Thank you. Well, let's have a look at our top stories for you this morning. Deputy Prime Minister there, Dominic Raab, telling this programme that Boris Johnson was not aware of any substantial formal complaints against his former Deputy Chief Whip, but did know of allegations of misconduct. 6 people have been killed and dozens injured in a mass shooting in an Independence Day parade in Chicago. A 22-year-old man has been arrested. And a Premier League footballer is arrested in London on suspicion of rape. Tamara's here. Morning.
Morning, Kay.
I'm more confused now than I was before.
I know, well, it now emerges that when Chris Pincher was a minister at the Foreign Office under the early part of Boris Johnson's government, there was a complaint made about him by someone who worked with him, and that triggered formal disciplinary action. The Deputy Prime Minister admitted that he was involved, that he spoke to Mr Pincher, who he claims he found to be an exceptional and very professional minister, and said to him that this must not ever be repeated. And that, it seems, was that. He says the victim, alleged victim, did not want to take it further into formal disciplinary proceedings, but he referred it to the Cabinet Office, who would have been aware of it. So when the Prime Minister was carrying out his reshuffle at the beginning of this year, the Cabinet Office, apparently he's number 10 keeps saying the Cabinet Office did not raise any objections to his appointment. Well, they would have known about that. Did the Prime Minister...
He did say he didn't tell the Prime Minister, though.
He said he didn't tell the Prime Minister at the time because there was no disciplinary process. So he said it wouldn't have tripped the wire of that level of scrutiny, but he has discussed, he said, this matter with the Prime Minister over the past few days. So perhaps that starts to account for some of these lines coming out of Number 10 saying we weren't aware of any serious specific allegation. Perhaps serious allegation means something that triggered formal disciplinary proceedings, but certainly concerns were raised about Mr Pincher's behaviour, and the Deputy Prime Minister was aware of them.
Where does that leave us from what Will Quince said yesterday when he was sat there to what Downing Street are telling us today?
Well, Downing Street insists that they are being consistent because they have said the Prime Minister wasn't aware of serious specific allegations ongoing at the time. But they were really contorting themselves yesterday. There was a briefing by the Prime Minister's spokesperson, regular lobby briefing to political journalists, in which he conceded that there were unsubstantiated allegations and then said that all the allegations flying around about Mr Pincher had been resolved. So anything that had been raised had been dealt with. So, for example, the story that was in the Mail on Sunday 5 years ago about Mr Pincher making advances towards a former Olympic rower and Conservative activist, that was looked at, no further action was taken. So they say everything they knew about was resolved. There was nothing ongoing. But this does continue to raise questions about the Prime Minister's judgment in knowing that there were rumours and allegations flying around and choosing to ignore those.
OK. Thanks very much, Tara. Tomorrow's take at 10 o'clock, 9 o'clock this morning, unless you want to stay on for another hour.
Love to.
OK, thanks a lot. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky has called for colossal funds for his country's recovery and has said the nation's forces wouldn't give up. The Ukrainian MP Lesia Vasilenko joining us now. Hello to you. Thanks for joining us on the programme this morning. Is Russia winning this war at the moment?
I wouldn't say so. Russia is trying to win this war, and they're trying to win it with the same methods they have used in 2014, whereby by pushing the world into a protracted conflict and tiring out both Ukraine and the West. They are trying to legitimize the land grabs, which they control today. And today that's 20% of Ukraine's territory. But the fight is ongoing, definitely, and the fight will be ongoing for as long as Ukraine gets the support, the military support, and of course the financial support necessary to fight back Russia, which still remains one of the top 5 largest armies in the world.
Although it does look as though Ukraine has, at least for now, lost control of the Luhansk region. What does that mean for you?
That's one of the eastern industrial regions of Ukraine. It was the principal industrial artery of Ukraine. Today, Russia holds control over that region. Just on 23rd February, they held a little less than a third of control over that region. So, of course, you are right, referring to your first question, that Russia is making advances in Ukraine, and they will continue making them until and unless they are stopped. And the only way to stop them today is, of course, through military pushback, and a much more fierce military pushback than we are having today.
You are asking the UN to force Moscow, to force Russia to pay reparations for the damage done to your country. Why do you think that even if the UN said that that should happen, that Russia, Moscow would abide by that?
That's up to the international community to unite efforts and to push Moscow to abide by that. Because, of course, there's no way that Putin will one day wake up and say, oh, yes, I did wrong. Let me pay out all the reparations. No, that's never going to happen. And that has never happened in the history of the world, where a wrongdoer would just repent and just pay up for all the wrongdoings that have been committed. No, but it is up to us as an international community, as a modern democratic society, to administer justice according to the procedures which are already in place within the UN framework, within the framework of the International Criminal Court, and of a possible tribunal which must be set up on the aggression of Russian Federation against Ukraine, because that will be how the societies of the future will look back in history, will look back on our society, and that is how they will judge us. And it's not, justice, it's not so much about the one who is being judged. It's about those who are doing the judging and who are administering justice to the victims of the crimes that have been committed by the wrongdoer, in this case, the Russian Federation.
How's morale with the military personnel?
The Ukrainian army is as determined as ever to fight back. There have been losses in the Ukrainian army. These losses have been big. There are huge numbers of prisoners of war at the moment, and that gives the resolve to the Ukrainian military, to the men and women alike who are fighting for Ukraine, to fight back harder, to avenge the lives that have been lost, and to get back their comrades, the members of their military units who have been taken prisoners of war.
I believe that the Ukrainian flag has now been raised on Snake Island for the first time since the start of the war. What will that have done? What did that do for morale?
That's a huge morale boosting exercise, but not only. It's also that island is also a sort of strategic point for Ukraine. That island has actually been a subject of many international disputes over the years, and there are energy resources around that island. So that's an important point in that term. But for the morale of the military, as you are asking, for them to regain territory and to set up flag at one of the first lands that have been occupied by Russia since February 24th, that's a huge boost. And I am extremely proud of the Ukrainian military who have been doing the fighting day in, day out, and who have finally managed to set up that flag and to see it fly high and proud on the Snake Island.
Russian officials in the city of Belgorod say that Ukraine has deliberately targeted dozens of residential buildings, several people killed as a result. I mean, if that were to be the case and to be investigated, that would be a war crime. Is that something that you recognise?
Not as far as I'm aware of, unless we receive other data from, I don't know, intelligence or whatever. There's no signs saying that Ukraine has been targeting inside of Russia.
So there have been no missiles being fired from Ukraine into Russia?
Not to my awareness.
Okay. Where are we as far as President Zelensky is concerned? He continues with his nightly address to the Ukrainian people. It must be incredibly difficult to try to continue to convince the people of Ukraine that this is a war that you can win, while also trying to convince the West that you need more military arsenal.
President Zelensky has been since day one, since the 21st of February, this rumour, this promoter of Ukraine inside Ukraine and outside. And this is exactly the kind of tactics that can work against Russia's plan to wage a war of attrition, meaning a war that will that is targeting the enemy by tiring out the enemy, in this case being not just Ukraine, but also being the Western powers. And President Zelensky is doing the best countering tactic there is. He is inspiring the Ukrainian population, and he is also inspiring Western leaders to do more for Ukraine. This is the only thing that can outplay Putin, by having the world and Ukraine united, and by having a complete 100% determination that Ukraine will be furnished with everything it needs to win this war, from weapons, from military training, from everything, every kind of sanction needed to weaken Russia. And I think this is key. The unity behind Ukraine and inside Ukraine is key in winning over Putin.
It's good to talk to you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us on the programme this morning. Much appreciated. Thank you. Travel chaos again, we're being told of today. Resignations yesterday, more flights being cancelled today. Let's get the latest with Simon Calder. He's travel editor of The Independent, standing by at Gatwick for us this morning. Oh, you're at Heathrow, forgive me. Talk to me, Simon, about What's going on with British Airways? What's going on with EasyJet? What does it mean for people who want to travel with their kids this summer?
Well, the story of the summer, Kay, is really set out here at beautiful Heathrow. Fantastic morning. Hundreds of people, flights getting away absolutely as normal, but not as many as there might be. British Airways. So first up, they've cancelled again slightly over 100 flights today. That basically due to shortage of resources. But crucially, they have not been cancelling them at the very last minute. Yes, there's been overnight delays and so on. The hotel where I'm currently adjacent to is absolutely full last night because of various problems during the evening. However, most people are getting away, and we are going to see on British Airways a couple of developments this week. First of all, we're going to see yet more cancellations for the summer. That will be because if they can give up some of their flying this summer, they've already cut 1 in 9 flights. If they give up even more to keep the operation kind of in going sensibly for the rest of them, they won't lose their slot. But the other thing hanging over their heads is 700 staff, passenger service agents working here at Terminal 3 and also at Terminal 5 at Heathrow voted overwhelmingly to strike. I'm hearing word, but I've not got anything official from the GMB or the Unite unions, that we might get strike dates announced today. They have to give at least 2 weeks warning, bearing in mind that the busiest days of this year are going to be the 22nd of July. That's a Friday, and the following Friday, the 29th of July. So that's British Airways kind of keeping going. Shall I go on to EasyJet?
Yeah, but before that, I want to know about whether if you've got travel insurance, you get covered.
Sure, yeah. And look, Which have done a big survey this morning saying that a lot of travel insurance policies don't cover you if your flight is affected by strikes. And talking of strikes, by the way, you're not going to see departures from here to Copenhagen, to Oslo, to Stavanger in Norway on SAS because their pilots went on strike yesterday afternoon. However, that is a concern. But for the vast majority of people, as you and I have talked before, Kay, insurance isn't kind of really relevant. You should get your holiday, and that's the message that has to be put across. If your flight is cancelled, the airline has to get you to your destination by hook or by crook, and that includes spending an awful lot of money buying you a seat on a rival airline. So, yes, unsettling, but I think kind of on the scale of the problems, not too much of an issue.
OK, just very quickly, if you would, on EasyJet, as you were saying.
Yeah, just imagine England lose their first group match at the World Cup. Gareth Southgate leaves and they're left behind. That's not quite what happened yesterday, but Peter Bellew, he is the chief operating officer of EasyJet, generally well regarded in his previous jobs at Malaysia Airlines and Ryanair. He resigned, or perhaps was resigned yesterday. There has been an awful lot of unhappiness, particularly among pilots and cabin crew. But effectively, here we are at the start of the absolute peak months of July and August, and one of their top men has left. Meanwhile, EasyJet continue to cancel mostly a few days in advance. And if you're flying in and out of Gatwick, that's the main problem. However, 1,700 flights across Europe on EasyJet will go away as normal.
OK, thanks very much. Thank you, Simon. Right, just a minute ago, sat here was the Deputy Prime Minister, former Foreign Secretary, telling me that the Prime Minister, he didn't think that he knew anything about what was going on with this Pincher chap back in 2019. Tamara's here.
Well, we have just seen a letter from the person who was the senior civil servant at the Foreign Office, the Permanent Secretary, Simon MacDonald, at the time that we now know a complaint was made against Chris Pincher back in 2019.
Yeah, which Mr Raab was just telling us about.
He said he knew about it, he dealt with it, but he only informed the Prime Minister in the last few days. Simon MacDonald, who was the Permanent Secretary, the senior civil servant at the Foreign Office, says that Number 10 have not been telling the truth about this. He said that when, a couple of days ago, the Number 10 was saying that no official complaints against Chris Pincher were made, he claims they were fully aware that when he was a minister at the Foreign Office, there were complaints made by officials about Chris Pincher's behaviour. An investigation into those upheld the complaint, which he says was of a similar nature to those reported last week at the Carlton Club, i.e. a groping, alleged groping offence. He says that the Number 10 were not being accurate because Mr Johnson was briefed in person about the initiation and the outcome of that investigation, and that Chris Pincher was not exonerated. So he's saying that Boris Johnson knew all of this. So to characterise the allegations as unsubstantiated is therefore wrong. And he is writing to the Parliamentary Commissioner for Standards asking for an investigation into all of this because he says that inaccurate complaints by Downing Street continue to be repeated in the media. And he says that he's conscious of the duty owed to the person who made the complaint, but this is his duty towards the victims. He said, Mr Pincher deceived me and others in 2019. He cannot be allowed to use the confidentiality of the process 3 years ago to pursue what he calls his predatory behaviour in other contexts.
This is the killer part for me. Just to analyse this for me, if you would. Given what we just heard from Dominic Raab saying that the Prime Minister was only told by him about it just a few days ago, an incident that happened in 2019 where he hauled him over the coals about it, but it didn't go any further. Mr Johnson was briefed in person about the initiation and outcome of the investigation. There was a formal complaint. Allegations were resolved only in the sense that the investigation was completed. Mr Pincher was not exonerated. To characterise the allegations as unsubstantiated is therefore wrong.
Yeah, he's accusing Number 10 of lying when he said that there were no formal allegations, no formal complaints raised. What Number 10 has said the whole time is, yes, there may have been rumours and unsubstantiated allegations, but the Prime Minister didn't know of anything concrete. That slightly changed yesterday when they say that anything he knew about had already been resolved. But the Permanent Secretary, he was there when this complaint was made about a minister, says the Prime Minister knew all about it. He knew that the investigation had been launched, so he knew a formal complaint had been made. He also knew what the outcome was, which is that he had not been exonerated. They found he had done what he was accused of doing, but as you heard Dominic Raab saying there, he had a talking to and then continued in his job. So the Prime Minister was fully aware of this the whole time and yet decided to appoint him to the very serious job of being Deputy Chief Whip in charge of discipline for the whole party in February of this year, knowing all about the fact that someone had made a complaint about inappropriate behaviour and it had been upheld.
Would the Foreign Secretary have known that the Permanent Secretary had spoken to the Prime Minister?
Well, Dominic Raab was clear that he'd briefed the Prime Minister about it in the last few days, and he said that the Prime Minister may have known about it before, but that he may have only known when the disciplinary procedure began. But certainly the senior civil servant at the Foreign Office says he was fully aware of the fact that it was happening and the outcome. So when Number 10 say they weren't aware of any formal complaints, he said that's incorrect and he now wants it investigated.
OK. Tamara, oh, goodness me, what a can of worms. We'll talk to you in the next hour. Thanks very much indeed. Let's change pace for now, though, should we? And one family lobbying to bring the cancer vaccine that saved their son Liam's life to the UK. 3 years ago, Liam was diagnosed with neuroblastoma, a rare type of cancer. Now, 3 years later, after his family raised money to take him to New York for an experimental vaccine, he is cancer-free. I'm pleased to say that they are all joining us now. There he is, dressed for school. Hello, everybody.
Hi.
Hello, hello. So that's Kylie, that's Liam, and then Claire and Mike. Hello to you all. Claire, Mike, tell us Liam's story.
Well, Liam was diagnosed with neuroblastoma cancer a day after Kylie was born. So I'd just given birth to Kylie, and the day after we received the worst news that a family could ever imagine. Our worlds shattered, and Liam started chemotherapy that day. He only had a 40% chance of survival, and we went in adrenaline mode, and he had very aggressive frontline treatments. And it was during frontline treatments where I discovered a vaccine that was only available in America that could potentially save his life. And I knew then that we had to have this vaccine for Liam without a doubt. The only problem was it cost around £250,000. And we were on a deadline. We had to start fundraising immediately. And lockdown happened. So we were in turmoil, but we met the most amazing family, and we appealed to the hearts of the general public, and the people of Kent and the world were incredible. They came together to essentially save Liam's life, and we managed to come up with the money. Off we went to America during lockdown with all the rules and regulations. He received the treatments, and a year in New York, was traveling there and back. He now is doing so well. He's got so much energy, and we are campaigning now to get the vaccine available in the UK.
And Dad, you have been speaking to the Health Secretary here in the UK, haven't you, to try to make sure that that vaccine is available for other families as well. How have you got on with that?
Oh no, that's all my wife. She's the one that's been doing all this fantastic work in terms of trying to bring this treatment here to the UK. She's been meeting with her local MP, who arranged a meeting with Sajid Javid to discuss bringing this treatment here to the UK, so that families don't have to go through what we had to go through, because there's potentially up to 50 families a year that are looking to try and get their children over to the US to have this treatment, which is extremely expensive. So my wife has been on a massive drive to create awareness within the government and to push to get this treatment made available here.
Sure. When I say you, of course, I mean you as a family, not just you, Dad. Mum, how does this vaccine work?
So it works on the immune system. So the vaccine is it works on the immune system, and that it helps the body recognize the cells that are causing the cancer, and then it makes cells to fight the cancer cells. So it's been proven to work, and all that evidence is in the US. So at the moment, we're trying to get a vaccine trial set up here as soon as possible, and we've had quite a few meetings, and hopefully, I'm hoping to meet with Sajid Javid very soon.
Fantastic. Well, we know he watches the programme, so hopefully he'll move that up in your diary a little bit, listening to what you have to say this morning. Now, Dad, how's Liam doing now? Does he want to talk to us, or is he a little bit shy?
No, he's definitely not shy. He's full of beans. But he's doing fantastic. He's got tons of energy. Liam, what would you like to say?
Well,
he was telling me he wants to go to the moon this morning.
Yep.
Well,
there we are.
Okay.
What's your favourite subject at school, Liam?
What's your favourite subject? Maths, is it?
Maths, so we show off. When I used to ask my little boy, he used to say lunch. Do you like lunch as well?
Yes, I like lunch.
Yeah, don't we all? And how do you get on with your sister? Do you play really well together?
Yes, we make 4-towel pillows with blankets.
Okay. And what about do you look after your little sister?
Yes.
Do you? If I asked her, what would she say? I don't know, does Kylie want to chat to us? I'm not sure. Kylie, hello, morning.
Let's talk. Do you want to say hello? It was your birthday yesterday.
Many happy returns. Did you get fabulous things? Oh, she's a bit shy. It's so lovely though, isn't it, Mum, Dad, to be, 2 years ago, you wouldn't have thought that you would have been in this position, would you?
No, absolutely nice. And we are so delighted, and we want to make a difference. And if we can help by bringing this vaccine into the country in any way, we will be achieving a lifetime goal. And Liam is our star, and I believe he actually wants to be a rock star. He told me this morning.
And go to the moon.
And go to the moon. Maybe he can be a rock star going to the moon. So
I think Elton John already did that in his lyrics anyway. It's good to talk to all of you. I don't know if the kids want to wave goodbye and say thank you to everybody that helped raise money for them. Bye, everyone.
Thank you to everyone.
Yeah, bye, bye. Thanks so much for joining us. Really appreciate it. Bye, everyone. Take care. Bye-bye. Bye. We'll see you in just a second here on Sky.